Look, I will be completely honest with you. When I, Krelvar of the Thanix Coalition, first laid my 3 eyes on the human they assigned to our combat training facility, I thought someone in the recruitment office had finally lost their mind. Seriously. This creature, this allegedly sentient being, stood barely 5 feet and 4 inches tall. She had only 2 eyes, positioned on the front of her face like some kind of predator wannabe, and her body mass could not have exceeded 55 kilograms soaking wet. Her skin was this pale peach color that looked like it would tear if you breathed on it too hard, and she had this mop of copper-colored hair that defied every regulation we had about proper military grooming standards. Her name was Victoria Hayes. And she was, according to the file that landed on my desk with all the grace of a meteor strike, humanity's newest addition to the Intergalactic Defense Initiative. "This is a joke, right?" I asked Commander Thex-9, my superior officer who possessed the personality of a malfunctioning food processor. "Tell me this is one of those human pranks I have been reading about." Thex-9's mandibles clicked in what I had learned was his version of a sigh. Negative, Instructor Krelvar. The human designated Victoria Hayes passed all preliminary examinations. She is cleared for advanced tactical training. She looks like she would snap in half if I sneezed near her. That is not our concern. Train her according to protocol. Protocol. Right. The protocol that had been designed for species that could bench press small vehicles and survive in atmospheric conditions that would liquefy most organic matter. That protocol. I watched through the observation deck as Victoria Hayes entered the training facility's main gymnasium. She wore the standard-issue training suit, which on her looked about as intimidating as a child playing dress-up in their parents' clothes. She carried a duffel bag over one shoulder and walked with this strange confidence that completely contradicted her utterly ridiculous physical appearance. Beside me, my training assistant, a Kryn female named Sela-Talk, made a sound that translated roughly to amused disbelief. "How long do you think she lasts?" Sela-Talk asked, her 4 arms crossed over her chitinous chest. "I give her 20 minutes before she requests medical leave." 20 minutes? I scoffed. "You are being generous." "I give her 10 before she realizes what a catastrophic mistake she has made." The gymnasium floor below us was currently set to standard gravity, 1.0 on the galactic scale. Most species in the coalition operated comfortably between 0.8 and 1.5. Humans, according to their file, evolved on a death world called Earth that sat at precisely 1.0, which meant they were adapted to, quite literally, the bare minimum. Victoria Hayes set her bag down on one of the benches and began stretching. Her movements were fluid, controlled, almost graceful. She bent in ways that would have required 3 of my joints to dislocate, touching her feet, arching her back, rolling her shoulders. "What is she doing?" Sela-Talk asked. Preparing to fail, apparently. The other recruits began filtering in. There was Gorth Prime, a Helvian bruiser who stood 8 feet tall and could crush steel with his bare hands. There was Nix 17, a Quellan scout whose species had evolved in 3 times standard gravity. There was Raxmul, Vendra Kai, Zenth 9, all of them seasoned warriors from species that had earned their place in the galaxy through strength, cunning, and the ability to not die when things got mildly uncomfortable. And then there was Victoria Hayes, who looked like a strong breeze would be her primary cause of death. Attention. I barked through the intercom system, my voice echoing through the gymnasium. "Welcome to Advanced Combat Training, Cycle 17. I am Instructor Krelvar, and for the next 6 weeks I will be responsible for determining whether you are worthy of serving in the Intergalactic Defense Initiative, or whether you should be reassigned to something more suitable to your capabilities, like janitorial services." I paused, letting that sink in. "You will notice," I continued, "that we have a new species joining us today, the human. Some of you may have heard of them. They are from a planet called Earth, which they claim is a challenging environment. They are here because their government believes they can contribute something valuable to our collective security." Several of the recruits turned to look at Victoria. Gorth Prime's faceplates shifted in what might have been curiosity or hunger. With Helvanians, it was always hard to tell. Now, I said, my voice dripping with what humans would call sarcasm. I am sure we are all very excited to see what humanity has to offer. So let us begin with something simple. The basic endurance assessment. You will run 50 standard kilometers on the track. No armor, no enhancements. Just you and your natural capabilities. I switched off the intercom and turned to Sela talk. Set the gravity to 1.2. Let us see how our fragile friend handles a little extra weight. Sela talk's mandibles clicked in amusement as she adjusted the controls. Down below, the recruits began lining up at the starting mark. Victoria Hayes positioned herself at the end of the line, her expression completely neutral. She was not showing fear, which surprised me. Most species showed some kind of stress response when facing their first real test. But this human? Nothing. Just calm, measured breathing and that same infuriating confidence. The starting signal blared. The recruits took off like a shot. Gorth Prime thundered forward with all the grace of a landslide. X-17 practically flew across the track, her species' adaptation to high gravity giving her an obvious advantage. The others followed suit, each one pushing their bodies to perform. Victoria Hayes started running. And I use the term running loosely, because what she was doing looked more like a controlled fall forward that she somehow managed to catch with her legs at the last possible second. Her stride was long, her breathing steady, her arms pumping in perfect rhythm. She is keeping pace, Sela talk observed. For now, I said. Wait until the fatigue sets in. 5 kilometers passed. Then 10. Then 15. Victoria Hayes was still running. Not only was she still running, but she had moved up from last place. She was now ahead of Raxmole, who was panting like he had just sprinted through a supernova. Her pace had not changed. Her breathing had not become labored. She just kept going, one foot in front of the other, like some kind of terrifying organic machine that someone forgot to program with a quit function. This is unusual, Sela talk said. She will collapse soon, I assured her. Humans have limited stamina. It is in their file. 20 kilometers. 30. 40. Victoria Hayes was now in third place, behind only Nix-17 and a Korthan named Vex All, whose species was literally bred for endurance racing. At 45 kilometers, Vexul stumbled. His legs gave out, and he crashed to the track in a heap of exhausted muscle and wounded pride. Victoria Hayes ran past him without breaking stride. Instructor, Sela talk said quietly. I think we may have made an error in our assessment. She is just lucky, I said, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. At 48 kilometers, Nix-17 began to slow. Her breathing was ragged, her movements jerky. She was running on fumes and whatever gods her species prayed to. Victoria Hayes caught up to her. For a moment, they ran side by side. Then the human pulled ahead. She crossed the 50-kilometer mark first, and then, and this is the part that made my 3 eyes nearly pop out of my skull, she did not stop. She did not collapse. She did not even slow down significantly. She just transitioned into a cool-down jog, circling the track twice more while the other recruits crossed the finish line in various states of cardiovascular distress. That is not possible, I said. Apparently it is, Sela talk replied. When Victoria finally stopped running, she walked over to her duffel bag, pulled out a container of water, and drank about half of it in one go. Then she sat down on the bench and began stretching again, like she had just completed a light morning workout instead of a 50-kilometer endurance test in elevated gravity. I pulled up her file again, scanning through the biological data. Humans, it said, were persistence hunters. On their home world, they would chase prey animals for hours, sometimes days, until the prey literally died of exhaustion. They could regulate their body temperature through a process called sweating, which allowed them to run in conditions that would cause most species to overheat and shut down. Their cardiovascular system was absurdly efficient. Their muscles adapted for long-distance travel rather than explosive power. Well, I said, after a long moment of silence. That was informative. Shall we proceed with the strength assessments? Selatok asked. Yes. Let us see how she performs when we test something other than her ability to run away from danger. I was, in retrospect, perhaps being a bit too optimistic about my chances of maintaining my dignity that day. The strength assessment was simple. Recruits would lift progressively heavier weights until they reached failure. Standard procedure. We had been doing this for 50 cycles, and the results were always predictable. Stronger species lifted more. Weaker species lifted less. The galaxy made sense. Victoria Hayes approached the lifting platform with that same calm expression that was starting to seriously irritate me. Begin with the 50-kilogram weight, I instructed through the intercom. She lifted it easily. No strain. No visible effort. Just a smooth, controlled movement from floor to overhead. 100 kilograms. Again, no problem. Her form was textbook perfect, her core engaged, her breathing controlled. 150. This one took her a few seconds longer, but she completed the lift without apparent difficulty. Beside me, Selatok was taking notes. Instructor, for a species her size, these numbers are highly unusual. I am aware, thank you. 200 kilograms. Victoria Hayes gripped the bar, set her stance, and lifted. Her face showed strain now, her muscles trembling slightly under the load. But she got it overhead and held it there for the required 3 seconds before setting it back down. 200 kilograms. This human, who weighed maybe 55 kilograms herself, had just lifted nearly 4 times her own body weight. What in the name of the void, I muttered. Fourth Prime, for reference, had maxed out at 300 kilograms. And he was a Helvian warrior who stood 8 feet tall and probably ate small moons for breakfast. How is this possible? I asked, more to myself than to Selatok. Perhaps their physiology is more efficient than we assumed. Efficient? She is built like something you would find in a pet store, not a military facility. The rest of the day continued in much the same fashion. Victoria Hayes performed adequately in the agility tests, excelled in the reaction time assessments, and absolutely dominated the hand-to-hand combat simulations despite being outsized by every single opponent. By the end of the first day, I was beginning to suspect that someone had made a clerical error. Maybe Victoria Hayes was not actually human. Maybe she was some kind of enhanced super soldier from a classified program. Maybe the file was wrong. So I did what any reasonable instructor would do. I decided to make the training harder. The next morning I increased the gravity to 1.5. Victoria Hayes showed up on time as always, dressed in her training suit and carrying that same duffel bag. She stretched, she warmed up, and when I announced that today's training would take place in elevated gravity, she just nodded like I had told her the cafeteria was serving a different flavor of nutrient paste. The other recruits were struggling. Gorth Prime moved like he was wearing a suit made of lead. Nick 17's usual grace had been replaced with labored, heavy movements. Even Vendra Kai, who came from a high-gravity world herself, was showing visible strain. Victoria Hayes completed every exercise without complaint. On the third day, I increased the gravity to 2.0. Half the recruits requested medical exemptions. Victoria Hayes kept training. Instructor, Selatok said to me during lunch break, I believe we need to discuss the human. What is there to discuss? She is performing adequately. Adequately. She is outperforming recruits from species that have been part of the coalition for centuries. Species that are physically larger, stronger, and more adapted to harsh conditions. Your point? My point is that perhaps humans are not as fragile as their initial classification suggested. I waved a dismissive appendage. One exceptional individual does not represent an entire species. For all we know, Victoria Hayes is an anomaly, a genetic outlier. The rest of humanity might be exactly as weak as we originally thought. Shall we test that hypothesis? How do you propose we do that? Selatok's mandibles clicked in what I had learned was her equivalent of a mischievous smile. I took the liberty of researching human athletic records. The numbers are surprising. She pulled up a holographic display showing various human achievements, the marathon times, weight-lifting records, swimming distances, mountain climbing expeditions. These are impressive, I admitted grudgingly, but they are extreme examples, the elite performers. According to this data, approximately 12% of the human population engages in what they call marathon running, for recreation. For recreation? They run 42 kilometers for fun, instructor, multiple times per year. Some of them do it hundreds of times over their lifespan. I stared at the data, trying to process what I was seeing. There is more, Selatok continued. Humans regularly engage in activities they call extreme sports. They throw themselves out of aircraft for entertainment. They climb vertical rock faces without safety equipment. They surf on waves that could kill them. They have invented something called an Ironman triathlon that combines swimming, cycling, and running over distances that would incapacitate most coalition species. This cannot be accurate. The data comes from their own planetary networks. I have verified it multiple times. I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly feeling unsteady. What kind of death world produces a species that does this for fun? According to their geological surveys, Earth has extreme temperature variations, predators in every biome, natural disasters including volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, and something they call winter. They evolved dodging everything from microscopic pathogens to multi-ton megafauna. Their planet has tried to kill them in every way imaginable, and they responded by inventing endurance sports. I looked down at the training floor, where Victoria Hayes was currently sparring with Gorth Prime. The Helvean warrior, who stood nearly 3 feet taller than her and outweighed her by at least 100 kilograms, was losing. Increase the gravity, I said quietly. Excuse me? Increase the gravity. I want to see where her limit is. Instructor, regulations state that. I am aware of the regulations, Selatok. Increase the gravity to 2.5. If she requests to stop, we will stop immediately. But I need to know. Selatok hesitated, then adjusted the controls. The effect was immediate. Every recruit still on the training floor dropped to their knees or collapsed entirely. Gorth Prime fell flat on his face with a grunt that shook the floor panels. Victoria Hayes stumbled, caught herself, and then slowly straightened up. She was breathing hard now, sweat pouring down her face, her muscles visibly shaking with the effort of just standing upright. But she was standing. 2.8, I said. Instructor. Do it. The gravity increased again. Victoria Hayes dropped to one knee. Her hands pressed against the floor. Her whole body was trembling. And then, slowly, impossibly, she pushed herself back up to standing. 3.0. Instructor Krell-Var, this is dangerous. The human could be seriously injured. She can request to stop at any time. Increase the gravity. At 3 times standard gravity, Victoria Hayes fell. Her body slammed into the floor, and I immediately felt a spike of what might have been concern or possibly respect. I was not sure which, but then she moved. She got her hands underneath her, pushed herself up to her hands and knees. Her face was red, her breathing ragged, every muscle in her body clearly screaming in protest. And she smiled. She actually smiled. Then she started doing push-ups in 3 times standard gravity. This insane, fragile, ridiculous human was doing push-ups. Mother of the Void, Selatok whispered. Victoria managed 5 before her arms gave out and she collapsed again. But those 5 push-ups had been deliberate, controlled, and completely voluntary. I immediately reduced the gravity back to standard, and medical drones rushed onto the floor to check on the recruits. Victoria Hayes waved them off, gulped down an entire container of water, and then walked over to her duffel bag. That is when I noticed something I had missed before. Her duffel bag was marked with symbols, Earth symbols, and one of them, prominently displayed on a patch sewn into the fabric, read, "Gravity Gym, train like you are on Jupiter." "Sella talk," I said slowly. "What is Jupiter?" It's a few taps on her datapad. Jupiter is a gas giant in the human home system. Surface gravity is approximately 2.5 times that of Earth. I felt something in my brain short-circuit. "Are you telling me that humans have training facilities that simulate high-gravity environments?" "It appears so, yes. For what possible reason?" "According to this, for fun and physical conditioning. They call it resistance training." I watched as Victoria Hayes pulled out what looked like weighted bands from her duffel bag and began strapping them to her wrists and ankles. Each band, according to the labels I could now see, weighed 5 kilograms. She had been training with weights this entire time. While we were increasing the gravity and marveling at her performance, she had been wearing additional weight for her own personal conditioning program. "Instructor," Sella Tok said quietly, "I believe I owe you 50 credits." She lasted significantly longer than 20 minutes. I could not even find the words to respond. Victoria Hayes finished securing her weighted bands, took a long drink of water, and then looked up at the observation deck. Somehow, despite the one-way glass, she seemed to look directly at me, and she winked. Then she walked over to the gravity controls, the ones mounted on the wall for recruits to adjust during personal training time, and entered a new setting. The display flickered. 5.0 times standard gravity. "Stop her!" I shouted, but it was too late. The gravity field activated, and Victoria Hayes began her cool-down stretches like she was relaxing in a park on a sunny afternoon. This, I realized with mounting horror and something that might have been admiration, was going to be a very interesting training cycle. Week 2 of training began with what I can only describe as a profound sense of existential dread. You have to understand something about me. I, Krelvar, had been training Coalition soldiers for 15 cycles. 15 cycles of watching the galaxy's finest warriors push themselves to their limits, break through barriers, and emerge as elite defenders of civilized space. I had seen Korthan berserkers punch through reinforced steel. I had watched Quellan scouts move faster than sensor arrays could track. I had witnessed Helvian heavy troopers withstand plasma fire that would vaporize lesser beings. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, had prepared me for humans. Victoria Hayes arrived at 0500 hours, which was 30 minutes before the official start of training. She was always early, always prepared, and always wearing that same expression of calm determination that made me want to throw my data pad out an airlock. "Good morning, Instructor Krelvar," she said, her voice cheerful in a way that should be illegal before sunrise. "It is 0500, I replied. "There is nothing good about this morning." She laughed. Humans laugh a lot, I had learned. They find humor in the strangest things, like exhaustion, pain, and the suffering of their instructors. "I wanted to get some extra reps in before the others showed up," she explained, dropping her duffel bag onto the bench. "Hope that's okay." "Extra reps," I repeated flatly. "You want to do extra training, on top of the already excessive training regimen I have designed specifically to break you." "Well, when you put it that way, it sounds kind of intense." She grinned. "I like intense." Of course she did. I watched as she walked over to the gravity controls and set them to 4.0. 4 times standard gravity. The kind of environment that would turn most species into organic pancakes. Victoria Hayes began jogging in place. Then she dropped and started doing what humans call burpees, which is apparently a form of self-inflicted torture that involves jumping, squatting, and pushing up repeatedly until your body forgets how to function properly. She did 50 of them, in 4 times gravity. Before breakfast, "Sella talk," I said into my communicator. "I need you to run a complete diagnostic on the gravity systems. I think they might be malfunctioning." "I ran diagnostics yesterday, Instructor. Everything is operating within normal parameters." "And run them again. Because what I am witnessing should not be physically possible. Is the human doing something unusual again?" "She is doing burpees in 4 times gravity at 0500 hours because she wanted extra training." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Instructor Selatok said slowly, "I think we need to contact Human Command. We may have received a special operations soldier by mistake." I already checked. Victoria Hayes is listed as a standard infantry volunteer. No special enhancements. No genetic modifications. No classified augmentations. She is, according to every official record we have, a completely normal human. That is terrifying. I am aware. By the time the other recruits arrived, Victoria had completed what she called her warm-up routine. She was barely winded, though her training suit was soaked with sweat. She grabbed a towel from her duffel bag, wiped her face, and then joined the others on the main training floor like she had not just spent the last hour defying the laws of physics. "Attention," I barked. "Today we will be conducting combat simulations in variable gravity environments. You will face holographic opponents programmed to match the combat styles of known hostile species. Your objective is to survive for 10 minutes and neutralize as many targets as possible." I paused, looking directly at Victoria. "The simulation will start at standard gravity and increase progressively. When you can no longer continue, exit the arena. There is no shame in knowing your limits." That last part was directed entirely at the human, who I was now convinced did not actually possess any limits. "Fourth Prime, you will go first." The Helvian warrior stepped into the arena, his massive frame crackling with anticipation. The simulation began. Holographic enemies appeared from all directions, armed with energy weapons and moving with deadly precision. Gorth Prime lasted 7 minutes before the gravity reached 2.2 and he was overwhelmed by the enemy projections. He exited the arena breathing heavily but uninjured. A respectable performance for someone his size. The other recruits followed. Nick 17 lasted 9 minutes and 40 seconds, which was the best time so far. Vendra Kai made it to 8 minutes. Raxmol barely managed 5 before tactical retreat became his only option. Then it was Victoria's turn. She stepped into the arena, rolled her shoulders once, and settled into a fighting stance that looked both relaxed and coiled at the same time, like a spring waiting to be released. The simulation began. The first wave of holographic enemies materialized. 6 combat drones, standard armament, medium aggression protocols. Victoria moved. And here is the thing about humans that nobody tells you in the briefing files. They are not the fastest species. They are not the strongest species. They are not even the most durable species. But they are the most adaptable. Victoria flowed through the arena like water finding the path of least resistance. She ducked under energy blasts. She used the holographic enemies against each other, forcing them into crossfire situations. When one got too close, she grabbed its weapon arm and used the drone's own momentum to throw it into 2 others. At 5 minutes, the gravity increased to 1.5. Victoria adjusted her stance, lowered her center of mass, and kept fighting. At 7 minutes, 2.0, she was breathing harder now, moving more deliberately. But she was still moving. At 8 minutes, 2.5, this was where Gorth Prime had failed. Victoria dropped into a roll, came up behind an enemy, and delivered a strike to what would have been its power core if it were real. The hologram dissolved. At 9 minutes, 3.0, Victoria was struggling now. Every movement cost her. Every dodge was a fraction slower. Sweat poured down her face, and her muscles were visibly trembling. But she was still fighting. At 9 minutes and 30 seconds, she took a hit. A holographic energy blast caught her in the shoulder, and the suit's feedback systems delivered a painful but non-lethal shock. She grunted, spun away, and kept going. At 9 minutes and 50 seconds, 3.5 times gravity, Victoria Hayes stood in the center of the arena surrounded by 4 remaining enemy projections. She could barely stand. Her breathing sounded like a failing ventilation system. Her legs were shaking so badly I thought they might snap. The timer hit 10 minutes. The simulation ended. Victoria Hayes had beaten Nick 17's time by 20 seconds, in higher maximum gravity. While taking a direct hit, she walked out of the arena, declined medical assistance, drank an entire liter of water in one continuous gulp, and then sat down to watch the rest of the recruits complete their simulations. "That was fun," she said to no one in particular. Fun. She thought that was fun. Sella talk. I said quietly into my communicator, "I need you to do something for me." "What do you require, instructor?" "Access the human military databases. I want to know if there are more of them like this." "More soldiers like Victoria Hayes?" "No, more humans. Period. I need to know if this is normal." Sella talk was quiet for a moment. "Instructor, I believe you already know the answer to that question." She was right. I did know. I just did not want to accept it. The breaking point came on day 12. I had designed what I genuinely believed was an impossible training scenario. The recruits would be required to complete an obstacle course that combined elevated gravity, hostile environmental conditions, limited oxygen, and combat simulations all at once. It was the kind of test that even our best operatives found challenging. I fully expected everyone to fail. I was wrong. Victoria Hayes completed the course in record time. Not just record time for the current cycle, record time for the entire history of the training facility. She beat times set by elite operatives from species that had evolved in conditions that made Earth look like a vacation resort. When she crossed the finish line, she was not even the most exhausted recruit. That honor went to Vexol, who had collapsed halfway through and required medical extraction. I stood in the observation deck, staring at the results on my display, trying to figure out where I had gone so catastrophically wrong in my assessment of this species. The instructor Sella Tok said, "I believe we need to revise the human threat assessment." Threat assessment? They are our allies. I am aware. But if one standard human can perform at this level, we need to understand what that means for the coalition as a whole. She had a point. A terrifying, sleep-depriving point. "Pull up the human homeworld data again," I said. "I want to see exactly what kind of environment produces this." The holographic display showed Earth in all its chaotic glory. 70% water coverage, much of it containing predators that could swallow you whole. Tectonic activity causing regular earthquakes. Weather patterns that ranged from frozen wastelands to scorching deserts. Gravity locked at 1.0, which meant every single human grew up carrying their entire body weight against that pull every second of every day. "They do not have anti-gravity technology?" I asked. "They do, but they rarely use it on their home planet." According to cultural databases, many humans consider artificial gravity to be, and I quote, "for lazy people." "For lazy people," I repeated numbly. There is more. Humans engage in something called voluntary physical fitness. They deliberately make themselves uncomfortable in order to improve their capabilities. We know this. That is what military training is for. No, instructor. I mean, they do this recreationally. Human civilians. The ones who never serve in the military. They have entire facilities dedicated to making exercise difficult. They add extra weight to their bodies. They run on machines that go nowhere. They lift heavy objects repeatedly for no practical purpose. They pay money to do this. I felt a headache forming behind my primary eye. "Show me," I said. Sella Talk pulled up video footage from Earth. Humans in buildings filled with equipment specifically designed to make movement harder. Humans running on roads in extreme weather. Humans swimming against artificial currents. Humans climbing artificial walls with tiny handholds. And they were smiling. They were actually enjoying it. "What is wrong with them?" I whispered. "I believe that is the wrong question, instructor. I think the correct question is, what is right with them?" I turned to look at her. "Explain. Humans evolved in an environment that constantly tried to kill them. So they adapted by becoming very, very good at not dying. Their bodies are efficient oxygen processors. Their cardiovascular systems can sustain activity for hours. Their muscles can operate in a wide range of conditions. Their immune systems fight off thousands of pathogens daily. Their pain tolerance is absurdly high because pain was just a normal part of existence on Earth. So you are saying that Victoria Hayes is not exceptional? Oh, she is exceptional, but not for a human. She is simply a well-trained example of what her species is capable of when they decide to push themselves. And based on the data I have collected, a significant percentage of humanity decides to push themselves on a regular basis. I looked back down at the training floor, where Victoria was currently helping Vex O with his recovery stretches. She was being gentle, encouraging, supportive, everything a good soldier should be. We classified them as a fragile species, I said quietly. We did. We were wrong. Spectacularly wrong, yes. I made a decision then, one that I knew would either validate my career or end it entirely. Sell a talk, send a message to Coalition Command. I am recommending a complete revision of the human threat assessment. Not because they are hostile, but because we have fundamentally misunderstood what they are capable of. If one standard human can perform at this level, we need to reconsider our entire strategic outlook. That is quite a significant recommendation, Instructor. I am aware. Send it anyway. The final week of training arrived faster than I wanted it to. I had grown almost fond of Victoria Hayes, in the way you might grow fond of a natural disaster that keeps visiting your planet, but never quite destroys it completely. For the graduation exercise, I designed something special. Each recruit would face a final combat simulation tailored to their individual strengths and weaknesses. It was meant to be challenging but achievable, a test of everything they had learned. When it was Victoria's turn, I made a choice that I still question to this day. I set the gravity to 5.0 and programmed the simulation with enemies that matched human combat doctrine. Fast, adaptable, ruthless opponents that would exploit any weakness. This is your final test, I announced. Survive for 15 minutes. Show me what humanity is capable of. Victoria looked up at the observation deck, and I swear she knew exactly what I had done. She smiled that infuriating smile and stepped into the arena. The simulation began. It was brutal. The holographic enemies moved like humans, fought like humans, fought like humans. They worked as a team, covering angles, creating crossfire zones, adapting to her tactics in real time. And the gravity. 5 times standard. The kind of environment where most species could not even stand, let alone fight. Victoria fought anyway. She used every technique she had learned. Every dirty trick, every tactical advantage, every ounce of that terrifying human endurance. When her muscles failed, she used momentum. When momentum failed, she used positioning. When positioning failed, she used pure stubborn refusal to quit. At 12 minutes, she was down to 3 enemies. She could barely move. Her face was pale from oxygen deprivation. Her hands were shaking too badly to maintain a proper grip. She grabbed a discarded holographic weapon and threw it at one enemy, then used the distraction to close distance on another, a brutal strike to what would have been its neck. 2 enemies left. At 14 minutes, she was on her knees. The gravity was crushing her. The remaining enemies were circling, looking for an opening. Victoria Hayes looked up at them, spat blood onto the arena floor, and laughed. She actually laughed. Then she exploded into motion. A sweep to take one enemy's legs, a roll to avoid the other's attack, a desperate lunge that connected with enough force to dissipate the hologram. 1 enemy left. 30 seconds on the clock. Victoria and the final holographic opponent faced each other. She could not stand. It had her dead to rights. The timer hit 14 minutes and 59 seconds. The enemy raised its weapon. Victoria threw a handful of arena dirt into its sensors, momentarily blinding the projection, and then collapsed forward, using her own falling body weight to tackle the hologram through its center mass. The timer hit 15 minutes. The simulation ended. Victoria Hayes lay face down on the arena floor, completely spent, breathing in ragged gasps. Medical drones rushed to her side. The observation deck was silent. Every instructor, every administrator, every visiting officer who had come to watch the graduation had witnessed what just happened. "Get me Coalition Command," I said quietly. Immediately. "Immediate." Sella Talk worked her console. "Connection established, instructor." "This is Instructor Krelvar of Training Facility Gamma 7. I am formally requesting an emergency session of the Strategic Assessment Council. I have information regarding humanity that requires immediate attention at the highest levels." The officer on the other end sounded skeptical. "This is highly irregular, instructor. What information could possibly require emergency council attention?" I looked down at Victoria Hayes, who was now sitting up, refusing medical assistance again and drinking water like she had been lost in a desert for 3 weeks. "Sir," I said carefully, "we need to talk about humans. Specifically, we need to talk about the fact that we have made a catastrophic error in classifying them as a fragile species. They are not fragile. They are not weak. They are, in fact, one of the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. And the truly terrifying part is that they do not even realize it." Explain. Dystery and... So I did. I told them about Victoria Hayes. I told them about the endurance, the pain tolerance, the adaptability. I told them about humans training in high gravity for fun. I told them about their death world and how it had forged them into something that should not work but somehow does anyway. And then I told them the part that kept me awake at night. "Sir, Victoria Hayes is a volunteer. She is not special forces. She is not genetically enhanced. She is not even particularly unusual by human standards. Which means there are billions more like her. Billions of beings who think that running 50 kilometers is a recreational activity. Those who deliberately put themselves in uncomfortable situations to improve, who evolved on a planet that tried to kill them and responded by inventing endurance sports." There was a very long silence on the other end. "Are you telling me," the officer said slowly, "that we have accidentally allied ourselves with a species of warrior athletes who do not even know they are warrior athletes?" "That is exactly what I am telling you, sir. Lord help us all." "Yes, sir. That is my assessment as well." The council meeting happened 3 days later. I presented my findings, my data, my recordings. I showed them Victoria Hayes completing the final simulation. I showed them human athletic records. I showed them Earth and explained exactly what kind of environment produces a species like this. The council members sat in stunned silence. Finally, High Commander Vex Karn spoke. "Instructor Krelvar, you are recommending that we reclassify humanity from a fragile species to what exactly?" "To a persistence predator species with extreme environmental adaptation and voluntary suffering capabilities, sir." "Voluntary suffering capabilities," Vex Karn repeated. "That is not a standard classification. With respect, sir, there is nothing standard about humans." Another council member, a Thanix female named Sev Lara, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting we do with this information?" "I am suggesting, ma'am, that we stop underestimating them. And I am suggesting that we be very, very grateful they are on our side." The council deliberated for 2 hours. When they reconvened, Vex Karn made the announcement. "The council has voted to accept Instructor Krelvar's recommendation. Humanity will be reclassified as a high-threat allied species. Furthermore, we are establishing new training protocols specifically designed for human capabilities. If they are going to insist on training in 5 times gravity for recreational purposes, we might as well give them proper facilities." I felt something that might have been pride or possibly relief. "There is one more thing," Vex Karn continued. "The council would like to offer Victoria Hayes a position as a training instructor. If one human can teach our soldiers to think more like humans, it might save lives." "Many lives?" I looked at Sella Talk, who clicked her mandibles in approval. "I will extend the offer, sir." The graduation ceremony was held the following week. 20 recruits had started the program. 17 completed it. Victoria Hayes finished first in overall performance, which surprised absolutely no one who had been paying attention. When I called her name to receive her certification, she walked up to the platform with that same casual confidence that had annoyed me so much on day one. Now it just seemed appropriate. "Victoria Hayes," I said formally, "you have completed advanced combat training with the highest marks in facility history. On behalf of the Intergalactic Defense Initiative, I certify you as a qualified soldier and defender of Coalition space." I handed her the certification crystal, which she accepted with a genuine smile. Then I lowered my voice so only she could hear. "I also need to apologize." She looked confused. "For what, sir?" "For underestimating you. For underestimating humanity. We classified your species as fragile, and that was wrong. You are anything but fragile." Victoria laughed. That same laugh that had confused me so many times over the past weeks. "Sir, I appreciate that. But you should know something. Humans are fragile. We break easily. We get sick. We get tired. We feel pain. We die from things that other species shrug off. Then how? We are fragile, sir. But we are not weak. There is a difference. We break easily, so we learn to keep going even when we are broken. We get tired, so we learn to push through exhaustion. We feel pain, so we learn to make friends with it. Our planet tried to kill us for millions of years, and we survived by being too stubborn to quit." She paused, her expression becoming serious. "That is what makes humans dangerous, sir. Not that we are strong, but that we refuse to stop, ever, even when we should." I looked at this small, pale, impossible creature and finally understood. Humans were not fearsome because they were powerful. They were fearsome because they were fragile and fought anyway. Because they knew they could break and chose to push forward despite that knowledge. "There is something else," I said. "Coalition Command has offered you a position as a training instructor. They want you to teach our soldiers to think more like humans." Victoria's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Interested?" She grinned. "Sir, I would love nothing more than to teach aliens how to embrace voluntary suffering for fun." I was afraid you would say that. And that is how Victoria Hayes, the human we thought was fragile, became one of the most feared and respected instructors in Coalition history. 3 months later, I received a message from Command. They wanted me to oversee the integration of 50 more human volunteers into the training program. 50. I looked at Sela Talk, who was reading the same message. "Instructor," she said carefully, "do you think we are ready for 50 humans?" I thought about Victoria Hayes training in 5 times gravity for fun. I thought about the data showing that 12% of humanity runs marathons recreationally. I thought about the fact that these beings evolved on a death world and responded by inventing sports that simulate even more deadly environments. "No," I said honestly. "But I do not think we have a choice. Perhaps we should increase the gravity in all facilities," Sela Talk suggested. Preemptively. "To what? 10 times standard? It might not be enough." She was probably right. The first of the new recruits arrived the following week. His name was Marcus Tang, and the first thing he did after dropping his duffel bag was ask where the high-gravity training area was located. "We have training scheduled for later today," I told him. "I know, sir. I just wanted to get some reps in first. Warm up a bit. Warm up. In high gravity." And before official training began, I looked at Sela Talk. She looked back at me. We both understood the same terrible truth. This was our life now. This was just what humans did. And somewhere in the universe, I suspected Earth was laughing at us. But here is the thing I learned over those weeks of training Victoria Hayes. Humans might be terrifying. They might be stubborn, reckless, and entirely too comfortable with suffering. But they are also loyal. They are brave. They are the kind of allies who will stand beside you when everything goes wrong, when the odds are impossible, when any sane being would retreat. Because humans do not retreat. They adapt. They endure. They find a way forward even when there is no way forward to be found. They call themselves fragile, and maybe they are right. But if this is what fragility looks like, I would hate to see what they consider strong. So yes, we reclassified humanity. We built them training facilities with gravity settings that would kill most species. We learned to stop being surprised when they did impossible things. And we learned to be very, very grateful that when the galaxy needed defenders, when the coalition needed soldiers willing to stand against the darkness, humans looked at the challenge and said those two simple words. Sounds fun.